I barely made it through the door before Mallory's voice sliced through the warmth of the house. "You brought that store-bought pie again," she muttered loud enough for her husband to hear, but quiet enough to make it seem casual. I held it in both hands, still warm, even if the foil tray didn't look impressive. I'd made it that morning, crust from scratch, filling, spiced just right. But none of that mattered. Her in-laws laughed. "She's consistent," her mother-in-law added with a wink. Mallory shot me a tight smile and waved me toward the far end of the dining room. "Kids' table," she said. "Sorry, we're packed this year." The seat wasn't even set. No napkin, no plate. Just a spot beside her youngest, who didn't recognize me and asked if I was the babysitter. I didn't say anything at first. I just placed the pie on the counter and tried not to crumble. Then I heard it, Mallory's voice, low and exasperated, floating in from the kitchen. "She doesn't really need to be here," she whispered. "But she insists. Every year." That was it. I straightened my back. My palms still smelled faintly of cinnamon. I turned, walked into the dining room, and said clearly, "Well, the trust fund's at $140 million now. Hope that's enough for dessert." It was like cutting the music mid-song. One fork hit the floor. Garrett's eyes widened. Mallory's face went still, as if she'd forgotten how to blink. I looked down the table. The in-laws stared. The kids stopped fidgeting. I didn't smile. I didn't blink either. I just walked back to the pie, adjusted the crust a little, and sat in the empty seat that was never meant for me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. And for the first time in her life, my daughter didn't know what to say next. After the divorce, everything got quiet. No more shouting through walls, no more slammed doors. Just me, a stack of bills, and the old recliner that squeaked every time I let it hold me too long. Mallory had just started college then, and she left with barely a wave. I told myself she was busy adjusting. I told myself a lot of things. I took longer shifts at the library reference desk during the day, shelving late at night. The quiet there felt like a kindness, but I knew checking out mystery novels wasn't going to cover more than my rent. I needed something else. So I started learning. It began with online classes on my lunch breaks. JavaScript, Python, Excel, macros. The basics, then more. I'd stay up past midnight watching tutorials with cracked speakers and notebooks full of scribbles. I never told anyone. Who would I have told? When Aunt Ramona passed, she left me $35,000, no strings, no drama. I remember staring at the check for hours. It could have cleared my debts. It could have fixed the roof. But instead, I used it to build something. I enrolled in a boot camp. I hired a tutor. I bought my first laptop that didn't come from a pawn shop. That's when the silence became useful. Nobody asked what I was doing, which meant nobody had anything to say about it. Mallory's calls dried up to holiday texts. "Thanks for the card," or "busy weekend, love you." I stopped waiting for her to ask about me. I started testing code for small startups. UI fixes, bug hunts, feedback loops. Then came a contract to beta test a dashboard for warehouse analytics. I made a little, saved a little more. With each job, I put a piece of my aunt's gift into companies that couldn't afford full-time engineers, but had big ideas. I didn't need recognition. I needed control. And I was getting it quietly, line by line, deal by deal, while everyone forgot I existed. And because no one was watching, they didn't see what I was building until it was too late. "Mom, you should sit here," Mallory said suddenly, animated, gesturing to the head of the table like it was some kind of throne. I looked at her, then at the chair. It had always been Mallory's spot during these gatherings, ever since she started hosting. I used to sit tucked beside the window, close enough to pass the gravy, far enough to be ignored. Garrett laughed, a little too loud. "Come on, Mom. We had no idea you were, what, a secret investor or something." He pulled out the chair for me himself. You never said anything. I settled in, slowly resting my hands in my lap. You never asked, I said. There was a beat of silence, followed by nervous laughter. Mallory filled her wine glass higher than usual. Well, she chirped, voice as brittle as dry leaves looks like. Thanksgiving just got a whole lot more interesting. The in-laws leaned in like they'd just remembered I existed. Her father-in-law, Doug, started asking about tech stocks. You must have a guy for all that he said then, elbowed his wife. Honey, maybe she can give us a few pointers. I'd love to know how you got started, someone added. It's just so impressive. Really? Mallory kept smiling, but her eyes were scanning me like I was a math problem she hadn't studied for. You always liked puzzles, she said, attempting a laugh. Guess it paid off, huh? I nodded, careful not to give them more than they already had. The conversation circled tighter questions, stacking like plates. How long? How much do you use a firm? Have you thought about a trust? It was strange being the center of gravity for once, like I'd slipped into someone else's life, but it didn't feel good, not in the way they thought it would. They weren't interested in me. They were interested in access. I listened, answered vaguely, and passed the bread. And while everyone leaned in, I leaned back. They didn't want my story. They wanted to see if they had a role in it. The kitchen was still warm from the oven. Mallory slipped in behind me, closing the door like she was trying to trap the moment before it got away. You really have that much, she whispered, as if the walls might echo her words. Like, actually, I rinsed the dessert plates, slowly, letting the water run hot. Yes. She hovered near the fridge, arms crossed. Where did it come from? Why didn't you tell me I dried my hands with the towel that had been hanging since I arrived? 15 years ago, I invested in a small data warehousing startup, I said. They offered equity instead of cash. I agreed. 10 years later, they merged with a logistics platform. That platform exploded during the pandemic. I held my shares. She stared at me like I'd spoken another language. You owned it. No, I said, meeting her eyes, but I owned part of what made it grow. Mallory didn't blink. So, what does that mean? Like you're retired now? I've been retired for 3 years. She sat on the edge of the counter, her tone suddenly thin. Is any of it mine? I folded the towel slowly, one corner over the next. That depends. On what I looked at, her really looked. The daughter I raised, now a stranger behind polite calculation. On what you've given me lately that didn't come with conditions. She flinched. You send me invitations, but only when someone cancels. You answer my calls, but only when it's convenient. You remember my birthday, but never call. You ask about me, but only when there's money involved. She didn't answer. Her mouth opened, then closed. I placed the towel on the counter and turned back to the sink. I don't owe you an inheritance, I said. I owe myself peace. Behind me, I could feel the silence tightening, not from shame, but from confusion. I reached for the last plate, my fingers steady now, and knew this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. By Friday morning, I had 3 messages from Mallory. The first came at 8:07 a.m. Hey, Mom, I was thinking maybe we could do lunch next week, just you and me. My treat. The second followed before noon. The kids want to see you. You should come by maybe Sunday. They miss their grandma. The third, late evening. Also, if you ever need help managing things, you know, accounts or tax stuff. Garrett's really good with that. Just offering. I stared at the screen for a long time. This was the same daughter who forgot my birthday last year. The same one who sent a text 2 days late saying she'd been swamped and would make it up to me soon. And now she wanted to do lunch show off the grandkids and manage my portfolio. I didn't respond. Instead, I called my attorney the next day. I just want to review the trust language again, I said. No changes, I added quickly. Just clarity. We went through it line by line. The terms, the contingencies, the names. I made a few notes in pencil and hung up the call feeling steadier than I had in weeks. Then I logged into the foundation portal and made a donation anonymous, as always. Enough to keep the local food bank stocked through winter. 1,000 families would eat. No one would know my name, no thank yous, no dinner invitations, just shelves filled and stomachs quieted. I closed the laptop and sat with my tea until it went cold. The phone buzzed once. Then again, I didn't check it. It's a strange kind of ache realizing you'd rather feed strangers than spend another evening pretending your daughter wants you for anything but what you own. But I knew what love felt like. I'd known it once, and I knew this wasn't it. So when the knock came Sunday afternoon and little voices echoed in the hall, I waited 5 full seconds before opening the door. They arrived just after 3. Mallory holding a pie she claimed the kids helped make. The older one, Emma, looked taller than I remembered. The younger Caleb clutched a tablet and barely looked up until his mother told him to. "Say hi to Grandma," she urged too brightly. "Hi, Grandma," they echoed, then glanced around the living room like it was a dentist's office. Mallory settled them on the couch with a tray of snacks I'd prepared. She gave me that tight, expectant smile again, like she was waiting for applause. For the first time in years, they sat with me longer than 5 minutes. But the conversation didn't feel like it came from them. "Mom said you traveled a lot," Emma said, her voice rising at the end, like a question. "Did you go to Paris?" I smiled. "No, sweetheart. I went to Des Moines last month. Business meeting." Caleb looked up from his tablet. "Is that in France?" Mallory laughed too hard. "They don't really understand geography yet." I nodded and passed them more apple slices. The pie sat untouched. That's when Garrett walked in, holding a bottle of red like it was an invitation. "Thought we'd toast," he said. "Actually, I've been meaning to ask. Mallory told me you're really savvy with business. We're launching something soon, solar panels, home kits tax incentivized. Could be huge." He poured without waiting for my answer. "If you're open to diversifying, we'd love to bring you in early. Even just a seed round." Mallory looked away, suddenly busy with the napkins. I stood and excused myself. Said I needed to check the roast that didn't exist. My hands trembled a little, not from age, not from nerves. Just that slow, quiet ache of watching something precious warp into something strategic. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I wasn't surprised. When I walked back in, the kids were gone from the couch. Caleb had wandered into the den. Emma was poking at a snow globe on the shelf, and Mallory was already clearing space on the coffee table for her pitch deck. It rained the whole weekend. The kind of soft, persistent rain that made everything feel slower, heavier. I made tea I didn't finish and wandered into the attic, unsure what I was looking for. The boxes were still where I'd left them, labeled, and my handwriting faded but neat. Mallory, 2004, college, winter break. I lifted the lid and felt dust bloom around me. Inside were birthday cards I never sent, postcards I bought, and never filled out letters I wrote late at night and folded carefully, but never got the courage to mail. I sat on the floor, legs stiff, and began to read them one by one. The first was dated 2 weeks into her first semester. "Hi, sweetheart. I hope orientation went well. The house feels quiet without you. I made your favorite soup tonight. It didn't taste the same." The next one, around midterms, I saw your old scarf hanging by the coat rack and didn't move it. "Silly, I know, but it feels like a piece of you." Then one from the holidays, never answered. "I miss you. I hope you're happy. I hope you think of me sometimes." I read that line aloud. My voice didn't crack. I think it should have, but it didn't. It just echoed softly against the beams. I folded each letter slowly, lined them up by size, tied them with string. My hands moved on their own, like I was packing away a fragile object I'd grown used to living beside. In the back of the trunk was a small wooden box, hinges rusted velvet inside, worn smooth. I placed the bundle inside and tucked in a single note written on plain paper. This is what silence costs. Then I closed the lid and turned the key. It clicked too easily, like it had always meant to hold those words. I carried the box downstairs and slid it onto the top shelf of my closet behind the sweaters I no longer wore. By Sunday evening, the rain had stopped, and Mallory had texted again. The brunch was at a place with brick walls and overpriced eggs, the kind of spot where people order oat milk and stage affection, like theater. Mallory greeted me with a cheek kiss and a compliment about my earrings, which she used to say looked old ladyish. Her friends were already seated, 3 women in blazers, all smiles, all effort. They made space for me like I was a guest speaker, not her mother. "You look so youthful," one said as I sat down. "Seriously, what's your secret?" "Clear boundaries," I replied, sipping water. Laughter a little forced. They asked questions about markets funds, long-term planning. One leaned in and whispered, "We've been talking about legacy trusts. Mallory said you might have insights." Mallory gave a modest shrug, like this all amused her. "She's low-key brilliant," she added, tapping her mimosa with mine. They kept going about impact investing, family foundations, leaving something meaningful behind. Then someone said it. "You must be so proud of Mallory. She's such a connector, brings people together." I looked up from my plate. My fork paused midair. "Pride," I said, "slowly comes from knowing who someone really is, not just who they pretend to be in public." The silence after that was thick. No one met my eyes. Mallory's smile faltered. She reached for her glass and chuckled lightly. "Okay, wow, Mom. We're just catching up." I folded my napkin calmly. "I'll cover the check," I said, standing. "Mom, you don't have to," she started. "I know," I said. The waiter approached, unsure of the mood, and I handed him my card before anyone else could speak. I didn't storm out. I didn't raise my voice. I just left with my dignity intact and their confusion hanging behind me like perfume that wouldn't settle. Outside, the air was crisp and still. I walked 3 blocks before I looked at my phone again. 2 missed calls. 1 text. "Mallory, can we talk? I didn't mean for it to go like that." I kept walking steady as ever and made a note to myself to check the scholarship drafts before Monday. I roasted a chicken that morning, not turkey, not fanfare. Just something tender, simple enough for 5. By 5:30, the women started arriving. Lorraine brought baked apples with cinnamon. Denise a bottle of wine someone had given her years ago and she'd never opened. Gail made rolls from scratch, and Nora sharp-tongued. Nora brought a card game none of us knew how to play, but tried anyway. We weren't family, not by blood. But we passed dishes like we'd known each other longer than we had. We laughed too hard at stories that wouldn't be funny to anyone else. We talked about knees that didn't bend right, husbands we missed or didn't, and the relief of no longer waiting for certain people to call. I told them about Des Moines, about the code I used to test between library shifts, about how I still couldn't bring myself to buy a new sofa. They listened without a trace of calculation. After they left, I washed the dishes slowly, letting my hands move through the warm water without rushing. Then I sat down at the desk in the corner of the den and opened my notebook. The scholarship fund would launch quietly starting spring semester. It would cover tuition, laptops, and housing stipends for women over 50 who wanted a second chance at something more than surviving. I signed the transfer paperwork that night. Another $1 million set aside. No press release. Then I opened the folder labeled Estate. The trust remained in place, stable, solid. But I added a clause Mallory's share would now depend on proof of care, not just relation. Kindness would matter more than DNA. There were other names added too. The women at my table tonight. The single mother I'd met at the food bank. A niece I hadn't seen in years, but who still sent birthday cards with real handwriting. Legacy, I'd decided, wasn't about preserving a name. It was about choosing who remembered you when you were quiet, and who showed up with an empty plate and clean hands, not expecting anything but the seat they were offered. The letter arrived 2 days after the fund announcement, wrapped in a pale blue envelope with a familiar curve to the handwriting. Thicker than usual. A longer message, perhaps. I sat in the garden with it in my lap, the afternoon light casting soft shadows across the stones. The tea beside me had gone lukewarm. I turned the envelope over twice. My name was written carefully. No mom, no return address. Just Celia, in her deliberate, rounded script. It could be an apology, or it could be another pitch. One more explanation, one more promise to do better, to stay close, to make room. I didn't open it. Instead, I folded the envelope and placed it under the saucer. Let the weight of the cup hold it still. The wind stirred the ivy along the fence. A hawk circled above, wings wide and sure, tracing quiet loops through the sky like it had nowhere to be and nothing to prove. I watched it for a long time. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel victorious either. What settled in my chest wasn't sharp or loud. It wasn't a declaration or an answer. It was just space. Space where disappointment used to live. Space I'd carved out myself, one firm line at a time, until there was finally enough room to breathe. The phone buzzed on the table beside me. I didn't move. It could wait. She could wait. Not out of spite. I wasn't punishing anyone. I simply didn't need the performance anymore. The attention. The validation. I didn't need to be visible in someone else's version of love. I already was. To myself. To the women at my table, to the legacy I had chosen, reshaped and protected. The hawk circled once more before drifting eastward, disappearing behind the tall trees. I picked up my tea, warm enough still to comfort, and let the silence stretch around me, not empty, not lonely, just full of things. Finally let go.